Hello, everyone. This is Mark with Skiddy E Media. I haven't been able to do 2025 annual report as much as I'd like within a good time frame, but I finally got there in the end on Christmas Eve with Joseph, who I've always been in contact with, and especially in regards to all my little curiosities and interests regarding censorship and media regulation. How do you do there, Joseph, or Joe, whatever you want to call yourself?
Joseph, I don't mind. Yeah, I'm not bad. I've just been back here in Colchester. First time in a while because I've just been away at uni. So, no, it's good to be back. Holidays and everything. Bit hectic, but yeah, no, we move.
Hey, we appreciate that. Well, I finally got you at a good enough time because I was going to talk about some of the highlight films as far as I'm concerned, and also other controversies that happen, at least within this year. As far as I'm concerned, it was the more political stuff that caught my attention more so than film rating itself. But it's up to you whether you want to sort of discuss bit by bit, because I probably won't have a great deal of time on my hands.
But, yeah, I'm happy to go with whatever you want to go with. I'm good with go with the flow.
Right.
But yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's been an interesting year for films. There's only been a couple of sort of standouts. I feel like a lot of films sort of just blended into one. I don't know what I would sort of put in my top 10 for the year. And yeah, if you're talking about censorship, I don't know what. There's not been too many like big things. I think. I don't know how you feel about that, but yeah, I don't know what the standouts for you on that front are.
Well, referring from my list of films of the best ones of the year so far, I would say the ones that at least intrigued me, censorship and film-wise, were mostly No Other Land and Palestine 36, which that's already tied in with political controversies. Like this year we had the whole Vylan and Kneecap issues that occurred at Glastonbury.
Yeah.
And then Jimmy Kimmel almost threatened to be cancelled until they retracted. You could say one battle after another also got a bit of a flack for some of its themes and messages. Long Walk was a bit of a question mark in of itself for quite a few people. And then on a lesser political note, then you got stuff like The Demon Slayer, Infinity Castle, and then The Chainsaw Man, Retsa Arc, that were animations that clearly weren't appropriate for children. And then Perfect Blue was released, and those three particularly caught my attention, particularly Perfect Blue and The Chainsaw Man.
Yeah, I haven't gotten around to seeing all of them, but I did have Chainsaw Man on my watch list for sure. They were showing it at the McRobert, which is a sort of cinema that's attached to the university I'm at the moment. So yeah, I was meaning to check that out. It did look pretty good, but I just didn't get around to seeing it. I've seen a few of the Demon Slayer films before, but I've not properly gotten into the show or anything. But yeah, I think you saw Chainsaw Man, was it, in Dublin?
I did. That was the first time I've ever been to a cinema in the Republic of Ireland, and it was a real blessing, I would say. It was a 15A there, mainly because of the violence. It was the same issue with strong bloody violence and gore in both sides of UK and Ireland and in US, but in Ireland and US they did note some sexualized nudity. For people who might not be familiar with this Japanese animation, it's quite gruesome. We got a lot of scenes of people's limbs being dismembered and blood everywhere. It's almost veering on sort of berserk Elfin Lee Gantz territory and Genocyber. And this is why I sort of get all nerdy about things. But the thing that made me what was going on here was more so a bit of nudity that had happened in one of the scenes where it looks like the two people were in the swimming pool at the university or college or whatever it was, and they had no nipples on. I was like, well, it's a rated R film. It's 15. You can show full frontal nudity, but it was a bit of a bizarre one. You'll have to see it for yourself. All I
Yeah,
can say is I'm glad I didn't see the film when I was into a lot of anime at the time, because I would have been a bit too excited watching that particular moment.
yeah. No, I don't know. I've not seen it, so I don't know too much into it. I suppose if it was made in Japan, perhaps it was made for a sort of younger demographic. I don't know what the sort of demographics of the show are.
It was
So,
PG-12 in Japan by Irin.
yeah, yeah.
So,
So maybe it was done for like a younger audience, I suppose. I'm not sure what the regulations and stuff are there, but I know quite a lot of nudity and stuff can get censored in Japan, um, particularly in like animation and stuff. But I don't know too much about sort of the specifics, I guess, in this case.
well, it's okay if you don't know too much. I think for a film like that, you have to be sort of in the know. That's why I struggle a little bit with it, because unlike, let's say, stuff I grew up when I was a teenager, this is not, like, for me, in the same sort of camp as Perfect Blue or Ghost in the Shell or the Ghibli's. This is sort of after the fact, and nowadays I couldn't be bothered to keep up with the latest trends. But that's just from my perspective. And regarding nudity in Japan, they do draw the line on genitalia, particularly male genitalia, is not permitted under Japanese law. I know they permitted that Kinsey film with Liam Neeson, but that was because there was a medical context to it. Otherwise, they would have said, no, you can't show that.
I suppose there's been a couple of things with animation this year. You saw Perfect Blue in the big screen for the first time, which was something that I know is pretty big for you. And I saw Princess Mononoke on the big screen for the first time as well, which just had its rating bumped up from PG to 12A. Which, honestly, seeing it again I'd seen for like the first time in about 10, 15 years, it did surprise me that, it was a PG, especially in like 2004 or 5 when 12A was the thing, because you have people's heads being blown off and sort of limbs being cut off, and there's lots of blood and you see that. So that was definitely surprising that was a PG back then. But I suppose that, maybe they had their reasons for that at the time. But yeah, that just got bumped up. But that's probably the only animated film that I've seen this year, insofar as being outside the realm of I did see a few things. I saw a few older films as well, like The Breadwinner. I saw that with my film society that. As well as obviously animation and stuff that with my younger siblings.
Oh, I totally.
Yeah.
Well, I know with Mononoke, I've always gone about it with my usual co-host Rob. That is a film I cannot understand for the life of me getting the PG. Yes, it's got the sort of dark fantasy elements. It's all a bit sort of grandiose, but PG and sort of graphic decapitations and people's stomachs being blown up by a gunshot and other sort of gruesome imagery does not register in my mind as parental guidance material. That almost registers to me like a 15 at best, or 18, not even 12. But I'll put it this way: it's a strong 12 based on the imagery strength alone. But sort of like the whole Jaws thing. That was a PG film, or A certificate that was very violent, very graphic for its intended audience. But if they raised it to 15, they probably would have got quite a bit of complaints, and they would have been sort of like they overreacted.
I know it was on the border back in 2012 because the film had originally was an A, then it was a PG. Although I think a lot of the reason it got less complaints was because the DVD had a 12 on it because of the special features. But when it came back in 2012, examiners were divided from this film that had previously been a PG, or whether or not they were going to put it at 12A or 15. But I think they said the known quantity and the dated nature of it sort of served as a mitigating factor to sort of keep it at 12A, and the fact that the other films as well, except for the second one, which is still PG, were sort of a 12 level, because 3 and 4 were cut for a PG, and then they were 15 in their uncut form, but went down to a 12 in 2000. So I suppose having Jaws at 12A also keeps it streamlined with the rest of the franchise, besides the second one, which is still a PG, but it's not been seen since the 80s, I don't think. So, yeah.
Because I'm not too familiar with the Jaws sequels of the franchise itself. I've only ever seen the original one from the 70s, and I know that's one of those sort of like gateway horror films that you watch when you're young, and you're probably not supposed to, but it helps you get acclimated for stuff that's probably a bit more heavier, like Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween, and then you get onto the more sort of like video nasty stuff like Cannibal Holocaust and I Spit on Your Grave.
Yeah. No, the sequels have a lot of sort of 80s cheese to them. I mean, Michael Caine's in the last one, and he said to this day he's never seen the film, but it helped him sort of buy an expensive house. But it's sort of, they think they get a bit more ludicrous and ludicrous. Like in the third one, they're in like a theme park, and the shark gets loose in like a sort of water world theme park, and it's all a bit silly. But yeah, I don't know. I guess kind of like the Meg, but I think I've always had more respect for Jaws just because I'm a fan of practical effects. And I think it's something that I always used that the Meg came out sort of 5-6 years ago. It looks really fake, but you say let's take something like Jaws and even its sequels from sort of the 70s and 80s, and they still hold up today because they sort of went out onto the sea and they did all this stuff with practical effects and stuff. I think it works a lot better.
I told
sort of the more technical aspects of the
film. That was one of the things that made me like sort of question mark as far as I'm concerned. Regarding some of the other ones I've mentioned, I could have brought up particularly. Well, it wasn't so much a ratings issue as much as it was like sort of political and social attitudes. I know Sinners probably got a bit of talk around the town. I know some people focused it on the music element, but then also the cunnilingus stuff, which you don't always see very much in films. So but you can show a woman receiving oral pleasure in 15 films, as Blue Valentine has shown, which was actually NC-17 upon initial release. But Sinners had the aspect with, obviously there was violence and vampire gore, similar like Dusk Till Dawn. I didn't challenge the rating on a film like that, and then also there's racially aggravated language and violence in keeping with the time's sake. And I'm sure people will say it's woke propaganda, but we'll let the audience decide on that.
Yeah, I think Sinners was an example of something that was quite fresh. I think it got a lot of buzz around sort of like film circles and stuff that I'd been to, like particularly at like events and stuff after it came out. I've seen it twice. I saw it in Wimbledon, and I saw it again with my film society. They sort of played it on the computer, hooked up to a projector in all the lecture rooms. But yeah, no, it's one of the bigger films of the year. Yeah, in terms of ratings, I think it's a pretty standard, straightforward 15. But yeah, it's definitely got some solid sequences, and it's probably my favourite Ryan Coogler film out of all of them. So yeah, I don't know. I thought that was pretty decent. Yeah. Was that one of the ones you saw in Wales when you went up and visited earlier in the year?
That is correct. Weirdly enough, Rob paid for my ticket, and he went IMAX for special seats, so I thought, are you sure? Because it would have cost me about 19 quid if that was the case, but he offered it, and I thought, that was awfully generous of him, because this is a film I wouldn't have, gone out of my way to see anything in IMAX, really, but he insisted. While it wasn't my favourite film of the year, it was about, I think, like in the sort of 15 to 16 zone. I do respect it, especially for the music scene and some of the things it was trying to say and do. And for a film like that was mass market, more or less aimed at a black audience, and it made all that kind of money, and they didn't threaten to sort of ban or censor it because it was woke. Obviously, woke is a term that they used to say, because it deals with socially progressive issues or it depicts ethnic minorities. Quite impressed me. Because right now, the sort of films we would assume would be doing very well right now would be like sort of Passion of the Christ and Top Gun. Because these are sort of conservative films that make you feel good. Yeah, America. Sorry, I got a bit political there, but that's been taking the front seat for me as far as like film controversies and issues as far as I'm concerned, to where it was all I could think of really this year, less so with the ratings that films had. I know that certain films, like for instance Marching Powder, had to be cut even at the 18 level because it
Yeah,
depicted a kid next to a computer that was showing pornography, which is
yeah. I
illegal.
saw I saw Marching Powder. Even though I think they'd produced the scene by sort of having a computer with a green screen and then superimposing the images on, like Poor Things. Yeah, I think just the way in which they shot that was, from a filmmaking perspective, pretty inappropriate. Like there was definitely, and in terms of the film and the plot and everything, there's not like much context to it at all. So I think it was a pretty inappropriate scene on the whole to just sort of put into a film.
Well,
Uh,
you're gonna
yeah,
get that from a sort of Nick Love film. A lot of his movies tend to appeal that sort of geezy, I'm a
yeah,
fucking right in it, you can't lot. I thought it was hilarious. It was one of the funnier films I've seen this year, but I don't know if it's as good as the Football Factory or Outlaw. But we'll let the audience decide from there. You also like Mr. Bright Stuff, which is on Sky. For similar reasons, because he's got Danny Dyer doing his whole "you cunt this," let's fucking have it large. West Ham United, you know them lot. You are nearby Colchester, Geezy
yeah.
crowd. But the thing that
No, Marching Powder definitely had a lot of like promotion around it. Danny Dyer, I saw he was on like a lot of like Lad Bible and like a lot of like stuff like that. There was a lot of like um, promotion for it, which I guess you don't get for a lot of those sort of films. It sort of had a bit of a buzz, I guess, around like England and stuff.
oh,
Um,
absolutely. I
which
mean, I don't think they released it anywhere else. I think it's only been UK and Ireland that it had found an audience.
yeah, I haven't seen it picked up. And usually with those sort of films, you do see it getting picked up for streaming in sort of Australia, New Zealand, or it will end up on Netflix in some other country. But no, it had quite a big release here, but I don't think it's had much of a release sort of outside of the UK, which I guess makes sense because it's sort of got quite a UK centric audience. But even then, quite a lot of those films do end up branching out and getting a sort of limited release, sort of on streaming or something elsewhere, which I guess I haven't seen for that one so much.
Exactly,
Um,
because they released Fackham Hole. I can't pronounce that title. In the US a week before it came out in the UK, and I'm like, well, it's
Second Hall,
yeah,
yeah, I
but
haven't
it's
seen it. It's showing, but it didn't really like stand out to me as something to. Maybe it's just the poster. I think a lot of British films have quite samey posters, so I'm often not sure on them because there's often a 50-50 on whether or not they'll actually land or not. But no, I don't know too much about it, so fill me in if you know more than me.
well, I've not seen Fackham Hall movie, but to me, it was going for that sort of Downton Abbey piss take type thing, sort of making joke on the aristocracy. That was a 15.
Yeah,
Marching Powder was 18. The reason why I brought Marching Powder's name up, not because of the cut, but also because it was an 18 film that didn't mention drug use as an issue. It was
yeah,
just
there
very
was
strong
something
language and
that's
sex
featured.
references.
Sorry, go on.
It was just very strong language and sex references, even though a large majority of the film is just Danny Dyer's character just snorting cocaine and doing pills. And the
Yeah,
title of the film is a giveaway for what the film's actually about. So I'm like, hmm.
yeah. I suppose like I don't know what the guidelines and were, or maybe it's the fact that it's sort of seen as a bad thing that sort of was seen as a mitigating factor on that front. But yeah, if you go into their extended insight, you can see it's a 15 issue rather than an 18 issue. Um, but yeah, 18 for very strong language. Still something that you can get an 18 for. But if you're doing that, it definitely has um, a lot of that, and yeah, there's some sex references in there as well. So yeah, I guess that was the two sort of category defining issues on that one. Did you see Weapons by any chance?
I'm afraid I haven't. Rob has. From what I was told, it had two particular scenes that pushed the envelope with the headbutting that was sustained, and then someone's face is ripped out, like an old granny's face. Her skin and
Yeah,
her face is quite
there's
gruesome.
like Shaun of the Dead sort of style sequence at the end, but then there's sort of a more sustained scene where someone headbutts somebody until their head sort of is caved in. If you've seen the like poster on the trailer with the guy with his face sort of like that, then yeah, that's the guy who's doing the headbutting. But the rest of the film itself is sort of quite. It's not as strong as those two moments, but it's definitely one of the standouts I think for 2025 in terms of films and releases. Um, I think it was a pretty well made film, and it definitely took me by surprise because I wasn't that won over by the marketing and stuff. But there's a lot of interesting stuff in there and fresh stuff. I wasn't too keen on the ending, but I thought the rest of the film delivered pretty well. Um, but yeah, in terms of like standouts for the year, obviously there's a few more films I've got to watch. I've heard Die My Love's not very good, but it did look interesting from the trailers, and Lynn Ramsey's a very interesting director. Um, I need to watch more of her work, but I've seen You Were Never Really Here, which is sort of like a build-up for like Joaquin Phoenix in quite a similar role to Joker before he was in Joker. There's a few other films that I do need to check out, but there's not been too much I think this year that was really of a standout. So I guess next year, fingers crossed for sort of like better films and stuff. But it wasn't an awful year either. I think it was just sort of a bit hit and miss.
Well, that's
I don't
not
know
a
if you feel the same.
problem. For me, there was quite a few standouts, but I think the major films that really stood out for me were the repertoire releases that I got to see at Prince Charles Cinema, which I bought a membership for so I can get that discount for £11 tickets. But then also just to say to people like you and everyone who's a film censorship nerd like ourselves, hey, guess what? Mark's got to see Clockwork Orange, Perfect
Yeah,
Blue, Showgirls. I
yeah.
swear there's
Prince
another
Charles.
one I saw. South Park, Big Along and Uncut. Those four big films, and to some extent Hard Boiled, which I saw in Quebec, are five repertoire releases, and then Basquiat I saw in Portugal that I'll never forget in my memory.
Mm. Yeah, the Prince Charles is really good. I haven't been since January. I saw After Hours by Scorsese with a friend of mine, um, which I'd not heard too much about before, but was a really sort of solid film. It was pretty funny, and yeah, like it was a very sort of enjoyable watch. Especially seeing it there. There's so many different things where they really recreate that experience, sort of seeing something um, like way back when, even down to the old black cards. Like when I saw After Hours, they got the old black card with a 15 on it from like the 1980s. They really sort of work to make sure you're getting the original prints of it as well. So it is like seeing something sort of back in the day. And they always have a really interesting range on as well. A few years ago, they were doing the works of like Wong Kar-wai. So I got introduced to that. I got to watch Chungking Express, which I thought was really interesting. So I went back and watched Fallen Angels as well, which sort of has interconnected and but not at the same time. And I think it's a really interesting place to go. And this year as well, they announced they're opening up a new location in Stratford, which is sort of on the east side of London. If you're coming in from sort of Essex or you're just in that area, sort of near Canary Wharf, near Shoreditch, near Whitechapel. So I'm interested to see how that goes, and I'm interested to see them branch out, especially after sort of being in the one location for a while. And I guess there's another controversy this year where sort of the Prince Charles, which is like one of the iconic cinemas of London, that's been host to like so many different directors and stuff, was sort of at risk of getting shut down. But I think it was able to renew its license in the end, which is pretty good because it's a very solid cinema. If you're into film, you're a film nerd, it's a really solid place to go to just sort of like see cinema from all over. And then as well as that, if you're wanting to see more films with variety, you just have to hop over the river and you're there at BFI. If you're 16 to 25, you can get free membership online. You can see as many films as you want there for just £3, And the Prince Charles has like a lifetime membership as well. It's about £60 as well. So it's not a lot of money, and it's really solid for the value you get if you're looking at seeing different cinema or older cinema, sort of lesser known films that can introduce you to a wide range of things. Because I think especially if you want to become like a filmmaker or you want to involve yourself in art, seeing different things, different styles that can inspire you, it's really good in terms of doing that. I don't know if you would agree, but no, two very solid cinemas that are in the heart of London, definitely worth visiting if you're ever there.
I would say so too. I've also been to the Rio in Dalston. That's another one that's quite magnificent. Unfortunately for me, because I'm in my 30s, I'm too old to qualify for 16 to 25 discounts. But if you're ever of that age, for all the Gen Z people, make use of that what you will, even if it's a bad movie. Those are very good prices indeed, especially because London ain't cheap. Because with PCC I paid about £11 for the membership, but I normally won't do that, but I did it particularly for South Park, Big Long and Uncut, and Clockwork Orange, because those were two films, at least as you well know, that I couldn't see growing up. So getting the privilege to see them on the big screen like that, even though the South Park one did not have the black card at the beginning, which I thought was disappointing, but it made up for it because I got to be in a crowd with a lot of people. They were laughing, they were sort of like, oh, maybe one of them was singing the songs. It was very joyous, and it got to fulfill a revenge mission of mine, 26 years in the making, that I couldn't see it when I was a kid, and I finally got to in the end. Payback. Yeah,
it's nice to be able to do that. I got to see Logan as well earlier this year, which I was about 2 years too young to see when that came out. I finally got to see it earlier this year, which was nice because it was sort of getting reshown. And yeah, I've seen a few older films as well, just through reshowings. Too, just because they're on like the local area, which is also pretty cool. To be able to sort of see things on the big screen.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. It's always nice to revisit films that are a bit of a, this stands out for its time, or this was controversial, or this was banned. I would certainly do the same if I ever visit the PCC again, if they do play like Salo or 9 Songs, or hell, even Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is like a PG film, which Disney didn't want to even release under Disney and put under Touchstone just to avoid the fallout. I would gladly pay £11 plus the train fare just to go see that, because these films mean a lot to me. Although 9 Songs is an excuse just to watch porno on the big screen, which I already did in France. I saw Gaspar Noé's Love. But I'm not going to go into detail about that.
It's still something I've not seen, but no, I sort of know about it, and I know it was sort of quite controversial at the time when it was released.
It is, but with the slew of films that had similar sort of elements about, like Destricted, 9 Songs, Romance, In the Realm of the Censors, it seemed like, oh. But Love had the additional fact that it was in 3D. Not even Caligula was in 3D. And the first thing you see is all sex and whatnot. It's the first thing you see in the opening shot of Gaspar Noé's Love. And I'm like, should I be in Soho or like Pigalle in Paris? Obviously Soho is where all the porn and smut and sex stuff is in London, so you're like, oh my, I'm gonna go to hell for this. But anyways, I'll jump back onto other films that were from this year particularly.
I don't want to get too off topic,
because for me, my top films were as follows in the top 5. No Other Land, Palestine 36 at number 5. They were fine at its categories. Palestine 36 was a strong 12A for the UK market. Ireland passes 12A, but they had a bit more reasoning for it, because they are a bit more sort of sympathetic to their cause than UK is. That's probably why I saw it in Ireland, so I didn't feel like, the police are going to come and arrest me if I watch it in England, because To Kill a War Machine was banned in Britain because they thought it was pro-PA, and I'm not going to state what PA stands for, but I'm guessing you already know what it is, because you can do up to 14 years prison if you support PA. But yes,
that was an interesting decision in and of itself, because I think it's the first time that a film's been rejected. It's been passed originally uncut, and then they've withdrawn that and rejected it. Because usually the general rule is that you can only withdraw something if the distributor does that themselves, whether that's to appeal for a lower rating, or I guess a higher one in the case of There Will Be Blood. But either that or it's withdrawn for cuts. But generally it's the distributor's decision. And it's always been a hard and fast rule of sort of the BBFC and the way that the ratings are done in England, that once a rating's been made, it's set in stone. So even if they get hundreds of complaints like you do in The Woman in Black or Dark Knight, the rating just stays as it is, and it can only sort of be changed once it's resubmitted by the distributor for a new rating, which is sort of different from other parts of Europe. I know in like Finland and stuff, you can literally just submit a request for it to be looked at again, and the censors can sort of like go and change the rating. Same in sort of the Netherlands and stuff. But it's the first case where I think, for legal reasons, they had just withdrawn it and changed it to being rejected, because it was a 15 for about a month, and then once it was prescribed, it was withdrawn and banned. But it had some screenings in the UK prior to the prescription in July. So that in and of itself is, I think, probably quite a significant step in terms of censorship.
No, it is, and that one was perhaps, well, for me, the most sinister of censorship cases, because unlike censoring violence or sex or bad language, this one had a political element, and I know how divisive that topic is to a lot of people. So that...
Would you say it's the first sort of political film that's had political banning to it? I mean, at least not for a while. Obviously, there's been cases sort of 100 years ago with Battleship Potemkin and stuff. On the examiner's notes, it was listed as sort of... I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something like Bolshevik propaganda or something it was listed as.
Yes, and films that were depicting trade union activism as a positive thing, or perhaps prostitution, they were given the snip or heavy cuts or bans at the time.
There was a film... Sorry, go on. There was a film from about 100 years ago about the IRA that was, I think, from 1928. It had two titles because they changed the title as well of that and sort of cut it back by about half an hour for it to get released. But that also got banned for, I don't know if it was political reasons or just violence, but that got banned. And I think the only other example I could think of would probably be like International Guerrillas in the 1980s, 1990s, where they were originally going to ban it due to sort of
libel,
personal safety. But Salman Rushdie himself had come out and said, no, I don't want this banned. I want people to be able to have the freedom to sort of see this stuff if they want to. And so the BBFC allowed it through. But it's the first case of just outright sort of political censorship from a film ratings perspective, which I guess you could say makes it probably the most significant ratings decision of the year, maybe.
Absolutely. Because I honestly didn't expect it, and then when I heard the news from Sky News that that group was going to be prescribed as a terrorist organisation, I decided to check the BBFC website again to see, what's the status of this now? And lo and behold, it said NA, which is code for rejected or banned, whatever you want to call it. And they list the reasons that it had to do with government legislation that was changing at the last minute, and that quite upset me because it's such a debatable topic. But as we have seen, as far as I'm concerned, even if it was banned, people still find a way to access it. You could even find it on YouTube, and then the people who are probably going to see films or have seen films like Palestine 36 or The Voice of Hind Rajab and No Other Land, No Other Land was controversial in that a cinema in the US didn't almost want to show it. They were going to revoke the cinema's license, and then one of the filmmakers was interrogated and beaten by IDF forces. So that was already horrible. The people who are going to see films like that, which aren't banned, they're like 15 or 12s, A-rated, they're probably going to be the same people anyways. Left wings or student types. Jeremy Corbyn, woo! Zach Polanski, woo! So it kind of defeats its own purpose. It would be like banning a film that says, I'm sorry to bring this up, kill a Paki or shoot the boats. Something racist and far right like that. They'll still find a way to see it, or they'll find supplementary stuff that feeds along with it that's legal, rated by BBFC, like 24, which depicts all Middle Easterners as terrorists. Get the idea? Get where my mind is at. So yeah, but that was just, I want that to get out of the way, because that was two films I can say that were highly controversial, especially No Other Land. But I know No Other Land was sort of a cusper, because that came out very early in the year and it already had releases last year, but we didn't get it in the UK until earlier this year, and when they aired it on Channel 4 one night. Other documentaries also were threatened with censorship that dealt with Palestine and Gaza that were quite troublesome. BBC didn't want to broadcast one of them to where Channel 4 bought the rights. Just recently, 60 Minutes, a CBS News program, it's a bit like Newsnight. They said no to a broadcast about the Seacop prison in El Salvador that Trump is putting in all illegal immigrants inside. The Seacop prison that is controlled by El Salvador's president Nayib Bukele, and they didn't broadcast it in the US market. Canada broadcast it, but from what I heard, now you can see it online. But that's still censorship because they don't want to upset the man in charge. You may go on about cancel culture, but cancel culture can rear its ugly head on both the left and the right. But the right does it even more. But they say, oh, we will never do such a thing as free speech. It's all political power playing games. I'll stop talking from there in case if they arrest me, because I spoke too much against, the powers that be. And that's why films like that, and I can even say on another level, fictional stuff like Eddington and Good Fortune and Sovereign, which were, Eddington dealt with COVID-19. Good Fortune was a film about economic and class issues. It was a comedy, a bit more lighthearted, but still it was quite depressing at places. And then Sovereign dealt with tax evaders and anti-government extremists. These were films with no censorship problems. They were divisive, especially Eddington. It's a great film. Quite violent for a 15 at parts, especially when you see someone's foot blown off and graphic headshots. But those were more power packing than One Battle After Another, which One Battle After Another was very radical, because it came out a little after the Charlie Kirk assassination, which that already led to Jimmy Kimmel almost threatening to be cancelled for life, and people lost their jobs because they thought, hey, Charlie Kirk being killed, that wasn't too bad, and that happened. But One Battle After Another came across as a little bit bourgeois, and then the fact that it defeats its own message a bit, because Leo DiCaprio is a well-known millionaire actor, and he got a quite good, handsome pay packet out of this, which sort of defeats its whole sort of purpose as a film about, revolution for the left. So, although I will say this, One Battle After Another does have a great performance by Sean Penn, and I hope he wins the Best Supporting Actor award at the Globes or Oscars or BAFTA, but we'll see. But for me, if you want something that's a bit more power packing, message wise, watch Eddington. Take my word for it.
Yeah. No, I don't know. And I'm not sure what the nominations are for this year, sort of going up into the Oscars, if they've announced them yet. But no. Yeah, I think Sean Penn definitely sort of gave very sort of creepy, well, maybe I don't know, he just gave a very good performance as like his character for the role that he was given, which I think for a lot of people going in will sort of like take them off guard a bit, maybe. but
Well, absolutely. I mean, it was almost cringe-worthy and hilarious because he was, like a military sort of commander general with a sexual fetish for black women, which, was a bit weird at first off, but it instantly reminded me of the Claude Frollo character from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, both the book and the Disney film, because he was, big as some sort of like pious individual. Never do such a thing. But then his disturbing sexual desires and almost rape-like fantasies got the better of him. And then he saw blackmails the woman when things don't go his way. So it deals with some very strange sexual and racial politics. Both one battle after another and Hunchback, so I saw similarities.
I actually thought Leonardo DiCaprio gave a pretty good performance in that as well. I think quite a lot of the time he can play... In some films, he can sort of play quite a samey character, but I thought he did quite a decent job. And the actress who plays his daughter as well did a good job. I think the cast all around did a pretty good job for the roles they were given in the film. I'm not sure too much what the other nominations are. Obviously, a lot of the films that get nominated sort of get like a later release here than they do there. A lot of the Oscar films will come out sort of January, February over here. So in my book, they'd sort of be 2026 films, because I sort of use the Mark Mode calendar of just whatever the UK release date is determines sort of what year the film came out in. Though obviously they do seem to be borderline when you've got 2 different years around the release. But no, there's definitely a few things coming out that I think maybe they'll get nominated, but I'd have to watch them first to sort of really say. I mean, we were only just getting into the sort of start of Oscar season. That sort of kicks off around October, November. But I don't know, it'd be interesting to see what does get nominated.
Oh, absolutely. I don't have any particular films in mind, but I am curious. Well, I was almost going to see it, but then I thought, save the train fare, I'll catch it on streaming. It was Magazine Dreams, which that not so much a censorship case as it much was Jonathan Majors, who plays Kang from like the Avengers or something Marvel. He had a lot of legal troubles because of domestic violence, and he beat up a white woman. He was almost viewed a bit like O.J. Simpson. And ultimately, it killed his career. I don't think he can work in Hollywood to the capacity again. And it took quite a while for Magazine Dreams to get a release, especially stateside. About 2 years after, we almost got it 2.5, almost 3 years after its release. So I'll have to see what the hype is about Magazine Dreams. But I think it's a movie that would intrigue me because it's about mental illness and loneliness and self-hate.
I don't know too much about it, but I know it's been delayed for a few years. Because, the actor involved, he was sort of set up to be one of the big villains in the sort of Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then he was charged with domestic abuse, domestic violence, which sort of meant that, he was rightfully sort of not part of the taken off of that, and I think a lot of the films that he was in, like Magazine Dreams, got pushed back quite a long ways. The controversy sort of died down as well. Although you do see sometimes like they'll release films regardless of the controversy as well. Like you saw that with Tron Ares this year with Jared Leto. He'd sort of been accused of sexual harassment and stuff, but the film was still or sexual harassment, sexual abuse. But the film still sort of ended up seeing its release in spite of that.
That also happened with The Flash. Ezra Miller, he's just a real wild card. But it didn't make any money. They just released it just to get it out of the way, probably for contractual reasons, because they had no other option to. It's not like, for example, Sound of Freedom, where it was delayed because of COVID. Then when they released it, they marketed it to certain groups. So ultimately became, sort of like by association of right-wing film. And then allegations came about that Tim Ballard, about the Underground Railroad project that he was involved stopping child sex trafficking. He got caught up in some scandal and was accused of harassment and abuse, but it didn't stop people from seeing it. It made lots of money. That was a weird one.
I didn't know too much about that. Was that the same Underground Railroad project that was on Amazon? Or am I thinking of something else?
Not the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad. That was doing like the slavery. This was more to do with like human sex trafficking. Sound of Freedom was that big film that people like Ben Shapiro and Donald Trump, they were championing as like a film that exposed the elite perverts and stuff like that. It made a lot of money. It got a lot of talk, but some of it was manipulative and misguided because of its political associations. It wasn't a right-wing film, so to speak. It just got linked with the right. In the same, you could say, some people have done that with the recent Superman movie, which I haven't seen, but I was told that the Superman movie was unintentionally woke. It was pointing fingers at the Israel-Palestine conflict indirectly, and I was like, all this from a Superman movie? Like, what's going on here?
I need to rewatch Superman, but I think after I've seen it, the more I sort of think about it, it's sort of grown on me like quite a bit in terms of like being a superhero movie. I think there's like some really it sort of has the Superman concept, but then in the world sort of similar to now, everyone's divided and there's a lot of like toxicity and stuff that you end up just like seeing all over the place. But Superman's just like a character who wants to like do the right thing, regardless. Like there's like a bit where sort of like he'd sort of flown in to stop sort of like a conflict where a bunch of people were going to die, and then him and Lois are sort of talking about the optics and the way the media will sort of play it and everything, and he just sort of says people are going to die, and I did this because I was doing like the right thing, like why is that so complicated for everyone? And then you sort of like it explores a lot of modern like political things that are sort of like while still also being in a Superman context. But there is a lot of parallels that have been drawn up with like the war and different conflicts and stuff, because you've sort of got sort of more wealthy sort of Western themed nation that's sort of going to invade and try and take over like a smaller, more impoverished country, but they're all fictional in context to like the film's world and everything, same as like the world the characters are in more broadly. But a lot of people have sort of drawn parallels with sort of like Israel and Palestine. I guess like maybe some other people have drawn parallels with like other conflict that's going on around the world. But a lot of people have sort of brought that into it, as sort of being a metaphor for that. I think it definitely divided people quite a lot in terms of politics. I do need to watch it again to sort of properly get my like a solid opinion on it, because I only saw it once. But yeah, no, there's definitely since I've seen it, I think sort of like there's a lot of like quotes and stuff that's grown on me. I quite like the sort of like maybe kindness is the new punk rock thing, because the world is sort of so fragmented and everyone's toxic against each other that sort of just being kind, being a good person, like bringing those things into the world where everyone's sort of so pitted against each other, sort of like how things are, particularly with like online discourse. I thought quotes like that I quite liked, and I think it's nice to sort of have a character who is good and pure in their heart, sort of up against a world that's sort of so divided. I think that's quite a good concept and sort of a good message to have to sort of promote, unity and people coming together.
Oh, absolutely. Because right now everyone's at each other's throats, and there are certain major players. It'd be easy to mention Elon Musk's name, but he's just one part of that puzzle that's responsible for forcing people to either die for their cause or be manipulated into solve falsehoods that don't actually exist in the real world. I've not seen the Superman film. I know they made a special BBFC black card for it, and they invited the person over for the premiere, which I thought was a nice gesture, but I can't really speak for it like I can, let's say, Good Fortune or Eddington or Memoir of a Snail, which I did see, which those three films, especially Memoirs of a Snail, is my number one favourite film of 2025. It's an animation from Australia, got a 15 certificate, which could only mean one thing: Mark has to watch it. But with that being said, however, I didn't see Demon Slayer because I just was not interested, and I seen Mugen Train at the cinema kind of as a throw at the dice, like let's see how this works. I didn't like it. But Memoir of a Snail I certainly did, and it only got a 15 because of some crude sexual humour and bits of cartoon nudity. Overall, I think the film probably could have been alright at the higher ends of 12, because I've seen Beowulf and Cowboy Bebop the movie, and Beavis and Butthead Do American. Some of the jokes in that were quite crass, and then Cowboy Bebop and Beowulf had quite a lot of violence for a 12 rated animation, so, but what do I know?
Yeah. No, going back to the black cards, I do think that's actually like a really cool thing that the BBFC do, where sort of young people can just like have the ability to do their own designs. Because if you imagine you're just sort of, I don't know, a teenager or even younger than that, and you make this design, you've got a passion for art, and before you could really even get into somewhere where you're studying that more professionally, you've had this artwork that you've done that sort of ended up on every cinema throughout the UK, no matter where you go. And I think not only is that like a really good experience to have, and in the case of I think both this and Wicked, the people that had done it got to meet the directors and cast of the film as well, which must just be a really cool experience more broadly. But they also have this like portfolio that they can, you know, look back on and show people when they sort of get older and they sort of end up going to college and university, or they start looking for, you know, jobs in art, if that's something that they pursue. And I think as well, it just adds something really nice to the experience of seeing a film, particularly if you're in the summer and there's a lot of hype around a particular film like Superman. There's a lot of fans, like people want to see these big characters, like to have like the black card as well, have this like really cool design and sort of be in the theme of the film, as well as all the things around it that people do. I think it's like a really nice touch as well to just have that on the black card, and I definitely would like to see more of that. It makes you, I think, it adds an extra layer of excitement to sort of seeing a film, even if it is a small thing. But yeah, in terms of animation, I haven't seen too many of the films, like I said. Sorry if I've been a bit like raspy sounding or coughing a bit. I've just been recovering from like a chest infection for the last few weeks. Scotland got put into a black alert, I think it was, like one of the highest alerts for sort of flu and stuff at the moment. So I ended up getting that. But no, I'm just recovering at the moment. But yeah, in terms of animation, I haven't seen too many of the adult animations that came out. I know Spermageddon, I think, was this year. I keep getting reels that sort of pop up on Instagram, but that's not had a UK release yet.
I don't even know if it will be released in the UK. I mean, they released Turtle in Trouble many years ago, but that was only sort of like seen as a bit of a lark. But we'll see how it goes. It would be quite cool, but at least we got some odd little films from Australia or France or Japan, obviously, that filled the void. I know this one's a PG animation, but this one certainly felt more adult. It was called Sauvage, which means savages or people of the wild. Same people done Ma Vie de Courgette or My Life as a Courgette or Zucchini, and it mainly actually was a strong PG, a bit reminded me of the Simpsons movie level sort of PG, where you had a middle finger gesture, public urination, an orangutan is shot, there's child nudity, and there's kids being threatened with guns, and there's a backstory about someone's mother being killed by like some sort of private militia who doesn't want them to expose that they're doing deforestation or logging within an area that was inhabited by the indigenous population. So it's quite a heavy film, very political type of animation, but very well-meaning. It's like Fern Gully for the Greta Thunberg crowd. I recommend it, but hardly anyone saw it. And I only saw it because they had a free screening of it, courtesy of Cinematic or the BFI Escape Scheme.
Nice. Yeah. No, I've not seen it. I know My Life as a Zucchini, My Life as a Courgette. I know that was sort of... I've not seen it, but I know it sort of had... It was on the upper end of a PG. I think it was a 12A in Ireland as well.
It was.
Sort of quite high up, I guess. But yeah, in terms of ratings, things, I can't think of too much else. You had the usual things of sort of a few titles getting downgraded. Cobra's now a 15 with Sylvester Stallone. I can't think of a few others that got downgraded this year. I know there were like a few
28 Days Later, even
yes.
its long sequel 28 Years Later got a 15, and I've seen some of the clips of that, and I was horrified by how gruesome and a bit well endowed it was for a 15. Like, okay, tone it down. At least the Bone Temple's going to be an 18, but still, that
the Bone Temple's not been rated yet.
I've got an 18 certificate.
I don't think it's been rated yet. I know it. I'll double check, but from when I've checked, I don't think it's been rated yet. I'd be surprised if that got an 18, because the original got bumped down to a 15 as well.
That upset me when it was bumped down to a 15.
Pardon?
It upset me when it was bumped down to 15. I mean, I already had a feeling that something would happen, but I just didn't want it to happen now. But there you go.
Wait. I didn't see that until today. Yeah, it is an 18. That's interesting. Sorry, I didn't checked up to see that it had been rated yet. But yeah, no, it is an 18, which is strange because the trajectory had sort of been that the franchise was now sort of at 15 level, given that the original was bumped down to a 15, and then 28 years later was a 15 and was quite gory. And 28 weeks is still an 18, but it hasn't been like reclassified by an examiner yet. So I don't know if that would still be 18 or will that go down to 15. I think weeks is sort of on the same level as days. So I mean, there's probably a bit more gore in it, but it's quite unrealistic. Some of it, like, it's quite silly and over the top. So I don't know where that would go. But no, that is interesting. Sorry to cut you off. That the Bone Temple's now an 18.
No, it certainly caught me by surprise, because I was like, oh no, they're going to say, oh, it's fine at 15, in keeping with the other part 1 or whatever they call it. And I was like, oh, well, at least they sort of retracted and thought, okay, let's not push our audience's luck too much. But then again, many 14 and 15-year-olds have seen Terrifier 3 behind their parents' backs and play stuff like Manhunt or GTA. So what do I know? I don't have kids, but I know a lot of, we were all young once. We were doing stuff that we shouldn't. I'm the person who still thinks that if you give Clockwork Orange or Pulp Fiction or Taxi Driver 15 at any minute now, I will hang myself. So don't trust my word.
Clockwork Orange would anytime soon, particularly given the updates and the guidelines. I saw it for the first time this year, and I need to watch it on the big screen, obviously, because I think, like with a lot of the classics and stuff, it's worth seeing it as it's sort of intended to be seen. But it is a very disturbing film. I think what I hadn't prepared myself for was just like the fact that a lot of the violence and stuff is done with like almost like a children's nursery rhyme type of like way in which they describe sort of acts of extreme violence.
That sounds about right, because it's almost a bit comical in the way they just beat people up or rape them. It's doesn't really send the best of message, but it's a very morally complex film that, like you said, I think deserves to be seen on the big screen because of the legacy it's had, where it was withdrew from distribution. It was never banned, contrary to popular belief, and it's led people to just go abroad in France or US or wherever to see the film legally wherever possible, or try to do bootleg copies. The Scala Cinema, that was almost like the Prince Charles Cinema for its time, went into bankruptcy because they lost a court case because they didn't fulfill the contractual obligations of Warner Brothers and the Kubrick estate, because they shown Clockwork Orange without authorization, and that was at the time where it was still banned from UK distribution. Even it was banned in Ireland until like 1999 or 2000. So that's how serious things got. So yeah.
It was an interesting one because Stanley Kubrick himself had been the one to ask that it was withdrawn from distribution, because there are a bunch of court cases that sort of links the film to crimes that had taken place, or like quotes from the film were used during different crimes. And so he said until he passed away that no, he didn't want anyone in the UK to sort of have that access to the film, which of course back then would have been a lot harder than today, where if something gets banned you can easily probably just like find it online or find a bootleg copy of it or something, which meant that it didn't get a proper release until sort of 1999, 2000. Same with things like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as well, though that was originally banned officially. That was also like the turn of the late 90s and 2000s, sort of with Furman leaving and like new management at the BBFC, that sort of like a lot of films from that era sort of finally got released as well.
Nope, that is true. They chilled out a bit, which obviously made my friend Rob, he was very happy about that. But for me, I was like, well, here's my opinion on it. Even though I come across as a bit too conservative at times, the reality is, I don't think you should ban or censor stuff at the 18 level. Either way, because people will find it ultimately somewhere, one way or another, but also at 18, it's the highest category. You should know your limits. Vaya con Dios. Go with God. So that's my perspective, at least with 15, 12, 12A, PG and U, there are its limits. So I do have a bit of a strange way where I'm somehow quite libertarian at 18, but everything else I'm more like, oh, no. Well, sometimes PG I wish would be more free-flowing, because PG films are too soft. The fact that the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants is PG, as of late, is just sad to me. As is the Paddington films, but what do I know?
I don't know. I haven't seen the new SpongeBob, but I can see the case for Paddington. I think it's particularly like the first one was quite frightening for children, with Nicole Kidman's character sort of trying to murder animals and tranquilize them. I think having that, a little bit of parental guidance there for younger children, I don't see a problem with that so much, because I do think like you've got to factor in, particularly at sort of UPG 12A, that children of that age are just going to get very disturbed by things, particularly at the UMPG level. So, I don't know, I don't mind sort of parental guidance being used more there to stop children getting disturbed by things. Because if you have younger children around as well, like particularly, they do get disturbed by things quite easily. Like even like random things as well. Like my sister ended up getting sort of freaked out by Flow, even though not much happens in that. And that was a U, so...
Well, I know Flo had a lot of peril, which is normally fine at you, and then they almost thought the cat was going to drown to death, but he ultimately comes up, and then some pelicans try to have a bit of a tackle with one another, and looks like he was trying to do some sort of gangland thing by stomping the pelican on his neck, and he was squawking like...
Did you ever see Hundreds of Beavers?
Isn't it a silent film that's a comedy that got a 12A because of like slapstick violence and some sexual humour?
Yeah. It's like an American film, or it's like near set sort of between in the parts of the US that sort of border on Canada, up in the wilderness. But yeah, it's that sort of like I watched that recently with the Film Society. That sort of surprised me as well, being a 12A, just because of some of the humour in it and sort of some of the, even though it's quite slapstick violence, it's sort of quite extreme as well. But I guess it sort of has like an element of over the topness, sort of similar to, I guess, like the Mighty Boosh or something.
I kind of get that. I've not seen Hundreds of Beavers, but I presume something's a little bit off with it, that it's not all that family friendly, because to me it looks like it would be like a PG film in some respects, like, I don't know, but then again, you know, as we've seen in recent years, there are PG films that do push the envelope a bit with like Hidden Figures and Race and the Simpsons movie, Paranorman, Isle of Dogs, Coraline. Recently we had Piece by Piece and Savages, which had some bits of swearing, and I think there's some drug content in Piece by Piece and references to racism, so I'm like, they can grow up a bit.
Yeah.
Oh yes, Across the Spider-Verse. I've not seen it, but I could imagine it had quite a lot of violence.
Yeah, it's sort of on the par with a lot of the other Marvel films. So a lot of the other Marvel films also go at 12A. I suppose it's a little bit lighter, but yeah, I think it was flagged up as moderate, or maybe, I don't know. But it's sort of like no, I don't know. It's sort of like feels more like in tone, at least, as well as sort of like the themes and stuff as being. It's more of a top. It's less of a lighter PG.
Okay, I get that. Pardon me. Well, as far as I'm concerned, you know, keep up with the hard PGs and the mild and moderate 15s, just like it was back in 2001 in my head. That's my weird nostalgia speaking, that unfortunately Rob thinks I'm crazy for thinking. I don't want to see like Frozen at PG on films like 28 years later at 15. That messes with my head.
Yeah, I suppose as well it's a big sort of generational shift as well, because sort of I imagine like growing up in the 90s sort of with Furman and stuff, like a lot of the time you'd get like stronger PGs and sort of quite like a lot of films were cut to bits at sort of like 15 and 18 level as well, so I can imagine that sort of factors into it as well.
Yeah, it is true, because I'm a millennial, although I'm a 90s born millennial, so I was sort of on that weird sort of transition end between categories. I mean, the fact that I got to see stuff like Men in Black and Small Soldiers and The Mask and Edward Scissorhands at quite a young age, and some of those films had quite a bit of violence in in The Mask's case, because it had the some of the gangland mafia stuff, and there was some sexual content. And then Men in Black had quite a lot of swearing, including the word shit. So I got away with seeing that as young as I did. And Edward Scissorhands had a quasi-sexual assault scene involving a woman flirting with Edward and, you know, showing her top, and she was like flirting with him a bit too much. It got me a little excited when I was watching growing up. So it made me stronger. I was like, I'm such a badass. Now I'm corrupted. I'm like, nothing can stop me now. I won't go into detail about that. I am sort of cutting it on time, though.
Yeah.
So you might have to finish some last-minute thoughts.
Yeah. What particularly do you want to like last-minute thoughts on?
Well, on my end, I've said about all the films that I wanted to say, except like Long Walk, for instance, which was passed at 16 in France, which is quite a high rating. Despite, you know, the 15 and the 13 plus in Quebec, or the 15 in the UK. But it's a pretty violent and quite grim film that I don't think would be too far from reality in another 10 years' time. I don't know if you've seen The Long Walk, but it's quite...
I've not seen The Long Walk, but it is, I guess it's probably like one of the few examples where so the UK is more liberal than France. But yeah, something that a 15 here being passed in the same category is sort of like Caligula and quite a lot of other films that are quite strong as well.
Well, Irreversible has a 16 in France.
Pardon?
Irreversible, the Gaspar Noé film with the horrible rape scene. That's a 16.
Yeah, same as that.
And Bad Luck Banging and Looney Porn. It's got the same rating as The Long Walk, and I'm like, whoa! How do you explain that?
Yeah. But no, I've not seen The Long Walk. It is rare for something to sort of get. I mean, even stuff that gets an 18 here usually gets a 12 in France, which is pretty mad. Like, there's the same for like Monkey Man, The Crow, the 2024 version. Quite a few others, Weapons, only a 12 in France. Poor Things as well isn't even a 12 in France. They thought that that would be too restrictive of a rating, and they gave it
Too public avertissement, which is almost like a PG.
Yeah.
Yeah, they even did it for Trainspotting 2 and Gone Girl. Those were sort of advisory or all ages with a caution for younger viewers. I'm like,
50 Shades of Grey, that got a 12. And then when that made headlines sort of around the world, they sort of spoke to a French correspondent for the CNC who was saying, well, actually, we sort of were on the fence about this one. We were thinking of sort of giving it the PG equivalent, but we ended up going with the 12 at the end of it. But I've heard that they sort of make their decisions with a nice meal and wine afterwards. Yeah. But no, very interesting dynamics, especially because I think, like, for a family, I couldn't imagine culturally sort of just taking your kids to sort of the cinema and thinking, well, that's okay at sort of PG level, but I suppose it's more about not restricting artistic freedoms and stuff, or putting as minimal limits on artistic freedom as possible over what is actually sort of recommended for young children. I couldn't imagine Poor Things sort of being ever seen as something that you'd take your kids to see, especially because you look at the neighbouring countries as well, and it's sort of got restrictive ratings, like it's a 16 in Germany, Spain, Switzerland, like quite a lot of the countries that you get around it, the Netherlands, like Belgium, so France is definitely one of its own on that one, though it does seem to cross over quite a lot. You get it in Canada as well, although Canada is a bit more sensible, I suppose. 50 Shades of Grey is sort of 16 plus and not a 12 or 13 plus. So I don't know, I suppose it's a little bit different, but that does carry across, particularly because the rest of Canada sort of rates their films sort of along the lines of, say, the UK. 14A is kind of like 15, 18A is like 18, and sort of PG and 12A sort of merge into their PG, and they've got G, so...
Oh yes, well, also you have to remember it's decentralised, and Quebec is the French-speaking province, so they operate by their own rules. 50 nuances degrés, those are all 16 plus, 18A in most of Canada, English Canada I like to call it, like Toronto and Vancouver and Winnipeg. But it does make you sort of like, WTF?
If something gets a 16 plus in Canada, it does often or a 16 or in France, or even if it gets higher than that, then it's unprecedented. But you can tell something's going to be a lot stronger when it gets that, because Poor Things, even in French parts of Canada, was only a 13 plus compared to the rest of Canada, where it was an 18A, which is crazy, because you'd expect it to at least be a 16 plus.
That is true. It sort of messes with your head a little bit, wait, shouldn't it be this or that? But what do we know? If only we had the opportunity to work with them, I suppose. But that's sort of an afterthought.
In terms of communication and stuff, like the French or the... Because some boards you can sort of open up and they can give you lines of communication, but I don't know how private they are. I mean, their websites are both very public. You can look through and see all the decisions and stuff, which isn't always the case for quite a lot of Europe, where finding details on ratings and stuff on the websites and stuff is a bit harder. So that's always one plus.
Oh, absolutely. I did try to contact with the Régie du Cinéma, which I think is under a new name nowadays, like the Ministère de la Culture et des Communications, in Montreal or Montréal, Quebec. I'm still waiting a response from them, but one can hope and pray. I will hopefully get to see the New Zealand Classification Office by next year if I can save up a flight ticket to go to Wellington from London Gatwick. But I'll let you know the full details on that. I'm not going to try to advertise that too much.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I saw Prime Minister recently, which is the documentary. I think it's probably a first and a 2025 film that sort of explores the life of Jacinda Ardern, where she was Prime Minister of New Zealand, which I think I've not seen in a film before, sort of like that much of a close-up of sort of her reaction and her response to sort of every little thing that happened while she was leader. So that's sort of interesting on the political aspect. You don't often get to see something that's done about a particular leader in that much detail.
Not that I'm aware of.
More curated for her because she was involved in it. You still get a more intimate portrayal of like seeing the day in the life while someone's making decisions and stuff, which is fresh. I think I've not seen anything like that sort of approach taken with the documentary.
Not really. I mean, they've done some documentaries about Barack Obama because he was the first black president in the US, but those were more for like television, or you could get it on DVD. I know. How old am I? You could get it on DVD or watch it on like CNN or HBO. But now I was quite surprised they done like a documentary about former Prime Minister Jacinda. People say it's propaganda or there's a bias to it, but some people can speak for themselves. I'm sure Donald Trump would be more than happy to have the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a documentary, say it's fair to say there's bias because you've been involved in it, and I think a lot of things are biased. More generally, unless the production is going into something completely blank slate. I think as long as you can come in with your own mindset of these things and see what's being depicted and see a particular point of view and making your own mind up about it, then I think that, as long as you're aware of all of these things, there's nothing wrong with it. And it's, like it's designed to sort of show her life and then show it in a positive slant. But, that's fair enough.
Oh, absolutely. I do have to get going though,
yes,
but it's been very nice speaking with you.
Everyone has a good holiday. Yes, and I'll speak soon.
Absolutely. Same for you. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
We'll talk again.